loves us and he wants us can change our lives, right? Because I don't know about you, but for so many years, there were people who tried to tell me who I was and tell me how I was, right? How many of you feel like you either have labeled someone or you have been labeled? Anyone? Very good. I thought so, right? We all understand that, right? And so this week, we're starting a new series. It's called Masterpiece. And in this new series, we're actually talking about how God says that you are a masterpiece. And I know you're probably like, okay, well, God says that about me, but you don't know what so-and-so says, and this person says about me. But what we're going to explore over the next 2 weeks is it doesn't really matter what anyone else says, because their opinion at the end of the day really loses value. And the reason it loses value is because we're going to start talking about who has the right to label you, right? So, who do y'all think has the right to label you? God has the right. Who else has the right to label you? Jesus? TikTok? But seriously, when you're here, guys, it's not. But when you are labeled, who actually has the right to label anyone? Or anything? Who has the right to label anything? But like, what if it's clothes? Who has the right to label it? The one who created it? What if it's a toy that you have?
Wait, Anya, leave it on. Yeah, my name is Bob Ross. And my name is Aaron.
So you can label yourself? Well, guys, that's what we're going to start to talk about a little bit tonight, is who actually has the right to label you. So you said a few different people who have the right to label you, or a few different things, but who has the right to label anyone? It's pretty easy. The person who made it, right? The person who created it, or the person who purchased it. They're the ones who have the right to label something, right? Because if I walked into your house, Isabella, and I was just like, this is Isabella's shirt, this is Isabella's lamp, but seriously, wouldn't you be like, that's super weird? It would be weird. Because I don't have a right to do that. I can't walk into Lizzie's house and be like, this is Meredith's pen, this is Meredith's light. I can't do those things. It's not mine. I don't own it, I don't live there, I'm not a part of it. So the person who actually has the right to label you is the person who created you. And I know that seems really basic, like who created you. But if I was to ask you who created you, who would you say? Parents? That was a good one. That was true. How about before your parents? God. Very good. But guys, listen up. My thing is this. You say that God created you, but how much do you believe that God created you? Because what I think is if you truly believe that God was the one who created you, then God would be the one who had the right to label you, right?
Yeah, that's why you shouldn't care what people think.
Exactly, you shouldn't care what people think. But if we truly believe it with all of our heart, it truly begins to change the way that we live our lives. Because see, if we're like, well, God has the right to label us, but we don't fully believe that 100%, that's the moment when you're at school and someone says, you're a loser. That it kind of starts to stick, right? Or someone looks at you at school and says, you know what, you're weird.
I am.
There you go.
That's a compliment.
Or for some people, you're like, it's not a bad thing. They call me a jock. That's like awesome. Or for some of you, you're like, I want to be known as athletic. But we have all these things that we either want to be known as or we are known as, right? But at the end of the day, if I was to ask each one of you, what are you known as? I guarantee we would have a variety of answers. In middle school, guys. So, when we talk about who has the right to label you, we're talking about God has the right. And so when you actually start believing that and living that, it starts to change the way that you live your life, the way you start doing things, right? It changes the way when someone says something to you at school, how it kind of sticks to you, right? How many of you this week at school have had someone try to tell you who you were? Yeah? Whether it's good or bad, try to tell you who you were, right? And And how many of you, you don't have to show your hands on this one, but you come from a family, like I grew up in a family where my parents fought like cats and dogs. Like, it wasn't a pleasant experience. But like, I always kind of wore that shame, right? It wasn't my choice that they fought, but like, if people knew that, like I was like, oh gosh, they're gonna think like I'm a weirdo. They're gonna think my family's a bad family. They're gonna think all these things. So I start letting those opinions affect the way that I live. And for a lot of you, you may believe that God created you. But what I'm saying is, have you allowed God to label you? Have you allowed God to be the one who speaks into your life saying, this is who you are. You are made in my image. And because you are made in my image, you are a part of me. That is what a masterpiece is. A masterpiece is a piece of the master that made them. So whether it's a piece of art or whether it is a person, you made in the image of God, that is a masterpiece. And God says, you know what? You are made in my image. You are mine. And so God says he has the right to label you. And I believe that. See, if you were to look in Romans 12, who knows about the book of Romans? Anything? Do you know anything about the book of Romans? It's called Romans. But here's the thing about Romans. Romans is actually a really cool book. Both books that we talk about tonight, because we're actually talking about the letter that went to the church of Ephesus, it's called Ephesians, and we're talking about Romans. Both of them are letters written by Paul. And what it is Paul's just really, in Romans, just pouring out, like, this is who you are in Jesus, people. This is just clear out, like you are saved, you are loved, you are forgiven. This is who you are when you know him. So in the book of Romans, he gets to the 12th chapter, and this is what he says. In verse 2, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think. Stay right there. See, there was someone who went before you in your middle school, in your high school, who said, this is what's popular, this is what's cool. Someone on TikTok told you this is what your hair should look like, this is what your makeup should look like. All of these people have influenced our lives. These people have went before us and set a standard. And what it's saying in Romans 12 is, don't try to copy this world. This world has nothing for you. Nothing. Because I know every single one of you, no matter what you do, at the end of the day, as hard as you're trying, if you don't have Jesus in your life, there is still that emptiness. It doesn't matter how much your hair is on point. It doesn't matter how nice your clothes are. It doesn't matter how amazing you've got the latest new kicks that are $1,500. It doesn't matter. Because what happens is, we don't care what the world says. Someone went before you, someone you don't even know, and set a standard for you. And when we think about it, it sounds a little bit absurd, right? Like someone else kind of dictates your steps. But that's what happens when we try to be popular or when we try to just fit in, when we just don't want to be noticed. It says, don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world, but let God transform you, change you, make you a different person by changing the way you think. That you will learn to know what God's will is for you, which is good, pleasing, and perfect. I don't know about you, but I would want someone to label me who wants the best for me, right? I don't want someone to speak into my life who's trying to put me down, who's trying to be better than me, someone who thinks that the more they step on someone else, the higher they get. Because that's not life. That's not real. But this says that God, he loves you and he has a great will for you. It's pleasing and it's perfect and it's good. He wants the absolute best for each and every one of you. And guys, that, for me, is exactly what I want labeling me. See, and then if we go a little bit forward and we go into the book of Ephesians, it's not really a letter like the rest of them where he's kind of had the correct behavior. This is literally where he's just encouraging people and saying, look, he loves you. This is what your life was like before. A hot mess when you didn't know me. But this is what your life looks like when you know Jesus, right? And so it talks about, in verse 1, in Ephesians 2:1, it says this, as for you, you are dead in your transgressions and sins in which you used to live when you followed the ways of this world. See, when you followed this world, it was empty. You were dead. There was nothing for you, right? It's that nighttime when your lights are out, you're sitting in your bed, and you kind of wonder, where's your self-worth? You kind of wonder, where can you measure up? You kind of sit there and you're kind of like, no matter what I do, I kind of feel like there's something more. I mean, I even think about Tom Brady. It was after, I think, his third Super Bowl, they did an interview with him, and he was like, I just feel like there's got to be something more. He went on to win Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl, and still said, there's got to be something more. There is! Because there is someone who created him. And no matter how good he is at football, no matter how fulfilled he is in all these things, if you don't know the one who created you, the one who tells you you are made in his image, then you will not be fulfilled. You will always feel like there's just something else left, that you're never going to measure up fully, that no matter what, at the end of the day, there's got to be something more. And God says, you know what? You are dead. You're dead to the way that you used to live. Those things killed you. They made you gross inside. They literally killed you because they weren't of me. But you know what? When you know me, which Kevin talked about last week, what happened when someone came to know what it was to walk with Jesus. It's that moment when you say, you know what? I realize that I live a life that's not fulfilled. That I live a life that's empty because I keep trying to fill it with the things around me. But I know that there is a God who loves me, who sent his son to die for me. And it's that moment where we begin to switch things in our lives, that we make a decision that it's not about me anymore. I want meaning in my life. I want something bigger, greater, and better. And it is Jesus. And when that transition begins to happen, he starts talking about you no longer follow the ways of this world. And he says, but when you make that change, when it kind of begins to switch, when you decide I'm not going to keep doing me anymore, I'm going to be like Jesus. I am going to be a follower of Christ. I am going to give my life to Christ. Then he says this in verse 10. He says, for we are God's masterpiece. He doesn't say, you are God's creation, you're made in God's image. He could have chosen anything here. Anything. And the Greek here is actually poema, which sounds like a poem, right? It's like a piece of art, a piece of poetry that God has. It's a piece of art that God made, and that is you. And so here it says that you are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so that we can do good things he has planned for us long ago. Everything about him is good. Everything he wants for you is good. I don't know about you, but there's a lot of things in this world, and I don't know that they're actually for me. I don't know that they're cheering me on. They don't have my best interest at mind, and they certainly aren't good. But everything that God tells me about who I am when I am following him, who I am in his son, who I am in Christ, that I am God's masterpiece. And everything about that is good and pleasing and perfect. I don't know about you, but that is what I want. I want to have this emptiness taken away, this distance, this always trying to add up, gone. And I want it filled with someone who says, you're perfect in my image. You're so valuable. I loved you enough that I would give my son for you. See, I guarantee if you ask any leader in this room who has a child if they would give them up for you, I don't know if that's going to happen. Sorry. But God loved you enough that he gave his son for you so that you could have a relationship, so that you no longer have to sit there and think, who am I? What does it matter? Who actually cares for me? Because at the end of the day, there's one person who has the right to label you. One person who has the right to label you, and that is God. And what does God say? God says you are his masterpiece. And that, my friends, is what can forever change your world. So who has the right to tell you who you are? God. Only one person can label you. The rest of them, you can allow them to speak in your life. You can allow them to give you power. But it's really just giving away your control for nothing, right? To someone who's temporary, probably. And definitely in this world, they're temporary. But God made you, therefore, God can label you. And God actually labeled you a masterpiece. We're going to pray, and then we're going to go into our different breakout groups, and we're just going to talk about what does that look like when I'm actually a masterpiece? What does it look like? How does it change the way that I act at school? How does it change? And you know what? I don't feel like that at all. Let's begin to talk about maybe why there is that disconnect there. Let's pray. God, you are a big God. And I thank you that you think every person in this room is worthy of you, God. That you died, that you gave your son for every person in this room. That because that blood was shed, that we can actually throw off this deadness, this emptiness inside of us, God, and we can be filled by you, God. And you only want good, perfect, and pleasing things for us, God. And God, how great is it that you label us your masterpiece, God. I can't imagine the one who created this earth, the one who created this entire world, took enough time to make us as a piece of him that would call us his, that we are loved, and that most of all, that we are a piece of him. And God, we thank you that we are a masterpiece. May you help us to be filled by you. May you help us to know you more. And as we go off into our groups, God, I pray that we don't get sidetracked by everything else happening, God, but we begin to be real with one another, God. The things that people say about us, God, and we begin to throw those away, God. And we begin to own who we are in you. And that is a masterpiece. May it begin to change the way that we act. May it begin to change the way that we talk and everything that we do from here on out. It's your name that we pray.